Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and wonders how much it costs to buy enough fireworks to cause a 5-minute delay halfway through. I'm Kevin Day and he is Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Hello Kieran, you snowed in like the rest of us?
No, we've had a twinkling, a sprinkling of snow, but no more than that.
You would have a twinkling of snow in Sussex, wouldn't you? Yes, we had it briefly. You didn't fancy going down to the Amex yesterday to let some fireworks off to celebrate like the Cheltenham fans did, thus inadvertently causing the game to be called off for 10 minutes?
No. I watched a bit of the match and got so bored I switched over and watched that film, Three Billboards, which was absolutely fantastic, and by all accounts I think I made the right decision.
Oh, well done. Well done for being in the fifth round of the Mickey Mouse Cup. It's Questions Day, Kieran, but of course we do have some news stories, I'm afraid. Derby County fans, you are stood down. Go and have some fun in the snow. You're not in this week. Celtic and Arsenal fans, stay where you are. Kieran, as predicted, a European Super League is back on the agenda, and I say as predicted because not a week goes by really without you saying there will be a European Super League sooner rather than later, and here we go looking at sooner rather than later again.
Yes, this came out on Thursday, and what happened was UEFA and FIFA, who don't really like each other. FIFA are quite jealous that UEFA have the world's most successful competition in the form of the Champions League, and they've been trying to get a slice of that themselves. But they brought out a joint announcement to say that any footballers who commit to play in a Super League would not be able to play for their countries in the European Championships or the FIFA World Cup. And everybody went, blimey O'Reilly, what's going on there then? So something was clearly rumbling, and then I think it was the New York Times and the Times managed to get hold of the document, which is part of the proposals. And surprise, surprise, Joel Glazer of Manchester United, his name has been linked to this. That document somehow found itself into my in tray, as these things have a nasty habit of doing. So. It's as you would expect. The big clubs want more power, more matches against each other, and more certainty. So, what this competition involves, and it appears to be underwritten by J.P. Morgan, the big US investment bank, who have got absolutely no interest in football, by the way, but do have a lot of interest in making money. So they were going to underwrite this, and they were going to pay the clubs, or the plan is to pay the clubs around about £300 million as an introduction fee to the competition.
Wow. And
that money, in theory, should go on infrastructure spends, which might explain why nothing's been spent at Old Trafford for ages, because I think the club's waiting for somebody else to pay for improvements to the stadium. And it's broadly similar to some of the things that we've seen proposed elsewhere. 2 divisions of 10 teams each. But what is intriguing is that 15 of those teams out of the 20 would be by invitation only, and they would be permanent members. So no matter how crap they are, they get to stay, which means, of course, they get the guaranteed funds. And then 5 clubs would qualify somehow for this competition on an annual basis. And some of the key drivers for this is they want some of the matches to take place at weekends. And again, we've had this discussion before, and we've said yes, that is one of the whether it's in the UEFA Champions League or whatever form of competition. they want the weekend matches, and the reason for that is that the big money in terms of selling TV rights, once you've done the European deals, is in Asia. And if you think about it, if you've got a Champions League match taking place at 8:00 UK time on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, well, that's 4 a.m. in China and the Philippines and places of that nature. So there's no significant market for it, but certainly the Asian TV fan market is huge. So a condensed or some form of cut down domestic program would be needed. So it all appears to be quite Machiavellian. So again, we've said this before. Carabao Cup will be kicked into touch. Totally, that will free up that will free up weekdays to allow the Premier League matches, some more of those to be shifted to midweek, which would free up more days to play at the weekends for this European competition. The only beneficiaries of this, of course, will be the owners of those clubs and the financial advantage that they would have, which is already huge. Manchester United already have 5 times the amount of money as the clubs at the wrong end, 4 to 5 times the money the clubs at the wrong end of the Premier League. That gap would grow bigger and bigger. So it's all being directed by money. The other strange thing, which initially seemed a bit odd, was that in terms of all the extra money coming in, you're limited to what you can spend on players. So wages and amortization, which I know is your favourite topic, would be limited to 55% of revenue. They currently average 84% in the Premier League. So what the owners are effectively saying is that where we normally have any increase in TV money very quickly flows through to the players, by having this rule, the extra TV money is kept in the pockets of the owners.
I'm intrigued by the 5 clubs who would be in for or by invite only. And given the size of Crystal Palace, I'm assuming that in the first year this takes place, they will be one of the clubs invited to take part in this elite European competition. So does that mean that we would still be in the Premier League and would be playing European Super League games as well? Because otherwise, if you're invited in and you might only be in the European Super League for one season, you stand to lose as much as you gain, don't you?
Yes, I mean it's very much a case of the owners want to have their cake and eat it. They know that the Premier League itself is very lucrative. The owners of the big clubs, and we all know who we're talking about. It just so happens that of the 15 permanent clubs in this competition, 6 are going to be from the Premier League. Now, they've not been named, Kevin, but I think if we were to do a quick quiz, I think we could probably guess with a degree of certainty who they might be, including clubs that haven't actually won the top division for 60 years or more. Yeah. So it does seem that it's totally geared towards bottom line, nothing to do with football, and it's the increasing Disneyfication and moneyfication of the game. They want to organise it so that they cut back on what they regard as irrelevant fixtures. The FA Cup will remain, but only the third round would take place on a Saturday. My understanding is that the rest of the FA Cup would again become a midweek competition, freeing up Saturdays and Sundays for this European competition. So everything which can make them more money will be employed.
I'm going to add a little value to this podcast now, Kieran, by telling our interested listeners about the expression "have their cake and eat it." Because until about 100 years ago, it used to be "eat their cake and have it," which makes much more sense because it means you want to eat your cake and still have your cake at the end, rather than because if you've got a cake, you're going to eat it, aren't you? Now, and on the subject of words, Kieran, I need to have a quick word with Guy about his use of the word reportedly, which does the same job as allegedly does on Have I Got News For You, i.e. nothing. Throwing the word reportedly or allegedly in does nothing to add to the veracity or otherwise of the story. But a Celtic have reportedly, Guy hears from a bloke in a pub, which he shouldn't be in because they're not open. Guy, what are you doing in a pub? He owns it. It's a gold pub. But Celtic have reportedly placed their entire under-18 squad on the UK's government furlough scheme.
Yes, we often talk about the tin ear of football clubs. Well, step forward, Celtic Football Club, in this regard. If this is true, and I believe it is the case, they're going to take advantage of the job retention scheme, which is its official name, and therefore effectively get taxpayer assistance for their under-18s. And the reason for this is, well, they're not essential matches, so therefore you can understand that. Football clubs have been, in the public eye, and if they'd just done that, I'd have said, well, okay, we see clubs in lower leagues taking use of the furlough scheme, and the rationale behind that it is fair, especially for people who aren't physically playing football. But this comes hot on the heels of Celtic Football Club taking the senior squad to Dubai for a team building exercise and a bit of warm weather training, and it just looks so dumb.
Yeah,
how can you justify going away, incurring the costs, taking on the risks of being in a plane by going to Dubai, staying there for a few days? It wasn't the most successful of trips because a lot of players have ended up in self-isolation since coming back, and then saying, oh, by the way, we're going to take the taxpayers' dollar as well. If you are struggling financially, then show that you're struggling financially, and that's one way of not doing so.
Well, especially as well, was a friend of mine, his son teaches in Dubai, and he was the first one to tell us they have got it over there. I mean, it was almost presented as though Dubai was some kind of North Korean COVID-free haven, and that simply isn't the case. So, as you say, it wasn't a good look. But I'm actually surprised to learn that under-18s get a wage to be furloughed anyway. I always assumed that under-18s weren't actually getting... But these are obviously professional academy players.
That's right. You can sign a contract on your 16th birthday.
Right. Oh, okay.
So yes, they would. Yeah, they won't be earning big money, but yes, they'll be on contracts which will then be renewed as they move through their development.
Okay. Well, on salaries, guys, I have to say I'm going to prepare people for the fact that this week the guys on sparkling form in terms of putting news stories and questions together, because this is the story about salaries and salary caps in particular. Again, as predicted. Plans for the new £18 million salary cap in the Championship next season already look dead in the water.
Yes. In order for the Championship rules in relation to any form of cost control to be approved, it has to have a 2/3 majority. So therefore you need to get 16 votes. Now, we don't know who the 16 clubs are going to be, first of all, because there's going to be relegation and promotion to take into consideration. But it's fairly clear from the noises coming out of a sufficient number of clubs to make that 16 look challenging, if not impossible. It's dead in the water. The proposal is for an £18 million salary cap. The average the average total wage bill in the Championship is 35. So it would be a significant reduction. And I appreciate that not every single pound of wages goes on players, but it clearly is geared towards players. So that the players are taking up the lion's share of that. And what we've seen is issues. We've got clubs coming down from the Premier League who are having earnings of over £100 million a year. Yeah, so to get that down to 18 would be a challenge. We've got clubs in receipt of parachute payments, and we've got clubs who are being bankrolled by rich owners such as Stoke City. And they say, well, we want to play it. We want to pay young men a good wage, and why shouldn't we? We've got the resources to do so. So it is going to cause an issue. If they did introduce it, the yo-yo clubs, I think, would accelerate, because any club that came down, if they were given the dispensation in their first couple of years in the Championship, they'd be able to do quite well. And also, as you know, I'm no stranger to a bit of creative accounting, Kevin, and I came up with half a dozen schemes within sort of 10 minutes of looking at this. And one of the finance directors, he says, well, there's lots of things that we can do. So if we have a player being transferred from one championship club to the other, in order to make the deal work for the player, the selling club gives the buying club or gives the player a termination bonus, i.e., a fuck-off fee, I think is the technical phrase.
Yeah, FOF,
and that's paid in lieu of some of his wages. Or what you could have is when a player signs for the club, he or a member of his family also happens to get an ambassadorial contract or some form of role with the club sponsor, which, of course, doesn't count towards the wages. And there's various workarounds in terms of that. So it would be really difficult to police. I can understand that there are issues in terms of wages not being sustainable. But as we've said, I think from day one of this show, the simple thing to do is when somebody asks for money, and let's face it, you and I, we've both experienced this with producer Guy, he just turns around and says no.
Mm. Yeah, no, he says it more charmingly than you just said it, Kieran. But yeah, essentially, he's still saying no, yeah.
So that's where it isn't going to work unless there is a sea change in ownership, or unless the administration and the rules of the EFL change, and that you don't need a 2/3 majority. But other than that, I just can't see how it's going to work. And a salary cap of 18 million compared to the average salary in the Premier League of 140, it just creates such a huge gap as to make promotion and relegation a real challenge.
Do you know I'm going to miss you, Kieran? Because inevitably, one day, someone in the Championship or the Premier League, a very wealthy club owner, is going to listen to this pod and say, do you know what? We need that Kieran Maguire bloke inside the tent pissing out. Let's get him off that pod. They can't be paying him much. Let's get him into our club, because he's going to make us a fortune with his schemes. You came up with 10 in 10 minutes. I mean, that's brilliant. I'm sitting here doodling. I can't think of one. Final news story, Kieran. It's something that we've touched on tangentially in the past, but we've never really talked about in great detail. But you've been given some insight into how much some of the club fan channels like Arsenal Fan TV earn every year. You get a lot of it. You've got a network of grasses around this country, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, and also, coming from a family for, when you're baptised, the priest says, snitches get stitches, because that is the family ethos. I do sometimes feel uncomfortable, but never reveal my sources. You know my approach to life.
Yeah, I'm guessing it might be somebody at Arsenal Fan TV that would narrow it down if this was Death in Paradise.
So social media and the likes of YouTube are proving to be very lucrative for these channels, which have been set up by fans and have become incredibly professional in the way they operate, and they offer a dimension of engagement between fans and an awful lot of the people that are watching these things are overseas. Yes. So they're international supporters. But it turns out, if these figures are correct, Arsenal Fan TV even is generating £1.2 million a year.
Holy mother, really?
Advertising. So and you do get one of my bugbears with YouTube, and I appreciate I pay nothing for the service, so I can't moan too much, is that there are too many adverts on it. If you take a look at Arsenal Fan TV, it's generating monthly views of 36 million.
Wow.
Which is a million a day, which means we better go and shut up because we're chuffed as we're closing in on 2 million for the podcast.
Yeah.
So it is indicative of the usual clubs. So Manchester United, I think they've got United Stand, which is getting 22 million views a month. That's making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds over a course of a year. But also, part of me says hats off to these people behind it. First of all, they are fans. They are. They've found a formula. They found a way of engaging. My own, I don't tend to watch too much of them myself, just because I find them a bit too populist. It's easy to throw a hissy fit upon a defeat, and sometimes they do look a little bit too pre-prepared.
Yeah.
And why are Arsenal so successful? Why are Arsenal top of the tree? It's because Arsenal are a bit bobbins as far as their football achievement. So bad news sells, and I think this is a perfect example of it.
Well, I think also where Arsenal Fan TV benefited from, especially in the first couple of years, was that fans of every other club used to tune in because it was so bonkers. You just used to laugh at these mad, bizarre Arsenal fans who didn't seem to have any clue about football, and I think they kind of realised that quite early on. So it was a successful business. But you've seen that. I mean, things like the Anfield Wrap, which started off with, almost literally 3 lads in their bedroom, which is now a very, very important and influential football podcast listened to people all over them, and fair play to them as well. I mean, these, things like the Anfield Wrap are really, really good listens, as we are. Just, as you say, every now and again, we get slapped down by Arsenal Fan TV in terms of scale. But Arsenal Fan TV don't get questions from all over the world like we do, Kieran.
No,
Interesting, insightful questions. So let's move on to ours this week. There's a couple of proper accounting questions. I will do my best. You might hear a gentle snoozing sound in the background for a couple of these questions. I will engage to the best of my ability. But our first question comes from Michael Short, who is in Switzerland. So he will have never seen snow like the 20-minute bombardment we've just had. My God. Michael's got an interesting question. It's a rhetorical one, but interesting nevertheless. Michael says, out of all the clubs who have never played in the Premier League, which for younger listeners and people who have got only Sky, I should remind you, started in 1992, which of the clubs that have never played in the Premier League are in the best position to push for natural growth and success at Premier League level, i.e. not just getting there and taking the parachute payments or broadcast income and getting relegated again?
Right, so 49 clubs have presently been in the Premier League, which I think is a fantastic achievement. Yeah, even in less than 30 years.
Is that as many as that? 49 clubs? Wow. Swindon, yeah, of course, yeah.
So, and that's one of the things which I love about football is that it does give genuine hope. And again, this is where I feel uncomfortable. Yeah, the huge gaps between the Premier League and the Championship, to a certain extent, are going to impact upon that. I've identified 3 clubs. The first of which is Bristol City. Big. It's a big town, big city. I appreciate there's a rugby fan base there, but the owner has put a lot of money recently into Ashton Gate, so that's looking better and better. That it would sell out every week. It is slightly off the beaten track, but there's a huge catchment area there. So I think that they have the capability and certainly the investment in infrastructure, conferencing facilities, catering facilities. It's all geared up for the Premier League. So that's number one. Secondly, it is a club that's not too far away from it at present, is Brentford. Because with their new ground and the ability, again, it's in London. It's in a part of London where they could get decent prices. They've got new facilities, and they've got a really clever development model. And the third club, again, going back to the southwest, is a club of which we both have a degree of affection for. It is Plymouth Argyle.
Yeah, of course.
They take huge sums of fans to away fixtures, given that everywhere's a long distance. In their present position, if they got to the Premier League, I think it would be a fantastic. And again, they've got an owner who is smart from a business point of view, and therefore could lock the club in potentially to more than just dipping their toes in for one season. So those are the 3 clubs that I've looked at from a financial point of view. That's not to say that anybody should say that they've not got a chance elsewhere. But in answer to Michael Short's question, there are certainly clubs that could A, get there, and B, stay there.
I was thinking about Brentford the other day, funnily enough. It's not a massive stadium, but it occurs to me that if they were to get into the Premier League, I mean, they're half an hour from Heathrow. They're perfectly placed, aren't they, for weekend tourists if they were to get in the Premier League and maybe do something like along the lines of Fulham's, little neutral bit. They could clean up if they reserved 500 seats every week for people that could just fly in very easily. That's a potentially money making scheme there, isn't it?
Yes, certainly. And remember, but Burnley have been in the Premier League, for a good few seasons now. Turf Moor's got a capacity of 21,000. Brentford will be charging London premiums, and as you say, they could really have some quite creative schemes for. You'll buy your ticket in New York, you fly across to London, you get met by a concierge and a chauffeur. It's a weekend away. They could come up with some really very lucrative packages, especially if they are playing some of the bigger clubs, or they wouldn't even have to do that. Such is the allure of the Premier League. For somebody to be able to, for people from overseas say, well, I've been to see a Premier League football ground, it is still something which is great to tell your mates about.
I like it when you think I have good ideas, Kieran, but I've known you long enough to recognise the tone in your voice, which is, it's a good idea, son, but it's not going up in the fridge. I recognise that tone of voice. Alex Bradley is a Birmingham fan, and Alex, I know they've had snow badly up in Birmingham, but mate, you've not seen anything like we've had this morning. It's up to the cat's ankles in the garden this morning down here, I tell you. Alex Bradley, the Birmingham fan, has been told that as part of the Che Adams deal to Southampton, Birmingham receive £20,000 for every appearance he makes. Alex says he was surprised at this, as he's only ever heard of appearance fees being part of the player's contracts rather than money to the selling club. Are there any other unusual continuous add-ons you are aware of in transfer deals? Now, I like questions that start, I've been told, but it does rather depend on who did the telling, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, if it's Karen from Facebook, I always take these things with a
She's a nightmare, isn't she, Karen from Facebook?
Well, I mean, she was right about 5G. And,
fair point, yes, she was. Yeah. Fair point.
No wonder Donald Trump tried to stop it.
Or lick it, one or the other, yeah.
Yes. So in terms of this, and in respect of Che Adams, by the way, that's not going to be for every single match he plays for Southampton. That will be capped at, say, 40 matches and £2 million. So there always is a cap in respects of these things of this nature. It's probably more common than Alex realises.
Oh, okay.
Appearance-based. And if you like the small print of football club accounts, and looking at this conversation, at least one of us does, you'll find in the small print that clubs actually normally set out the total potential amounts that they could have to pay to other clubs and players in terms of issues of this nature. Right. So it's not just appearances for the club; it also could be international caps. So the selling club might get money for each of the first 10 or 20 international caps. Right. I've also seen goal bonuses going from one club to another, clean sheets, everything that potentially clubs. And the most common one, and I appreciate it's not a match by match one, is especially in the January window, is relegation avoidance bonuses if you make a signing in January. Right. So the fee is £3 million, and if you stay up, that goes up to £4 million.
So this £20,000 per match appearance fee for Che Adams, is that to get round the idea that the buying club could say, right, we'll give you an extra £2 million if he plays 40 games, but then after 39 games, he doesn't play the 40th game?
Perfect.
Is that as simple as that? Oh, I'm on fire today. Our next question is from David Hugerwerth, open brackets, Hoogie, close brackets. Hoogie has hit my nail right on the head, Kieran. Hoogie says, could the FA bring in a service charge whereby they charge, say, 5% of clubs' total transfer fees and use that as an emergency fund for clubs in times of crisis? Now, as you know, Kieran, this is virtually the first thing I said to you when we met for the first time in those glorious pre-COVID days in a pub with a slightly embarrassed guy hopping from foot to foot, hoping I didn't notice your Brighton badge. When I said, and I've been saying this for 20 years, why can't the FA charge 1%, 5%, 10%, whatever it is, of a club's turnover every year that goes into a benevolent fund that is then properly managed. And if a club does get into trouble through no fault of their own, they can apply for funds through that. For me, that just seems like a simple way out of the problems for a lot of clubs that are struggling. Now would be a very good example.
Well, there is nothing to stop them from having something of this nature. However, there are some existing commissions that do take place in respect of transfers. So if it's an international transfer, then a proportion of the fee goes to the clubs that the player played for before he was 23. So that goes back to help academies and development. The player himself will usually get a slice of the fee, and so there are amounts which are taken out of the headline figures that we see. The only thing stopping this is the clubs have got to vote for it,
right?
And what the well-run clubs will say, isn't this effectively giving a license for those clubs which are run in a more cavalier manner to continue to act safe in the knowledge that even if things do go wrong, then somebody's going to come in and bail them out. So I can understand the Hoogmeister and his viewpoint, and it does have some merit. There is something which is already taking place, which means that money is already going out of those transfer fees that we see, which does get reinvested in the game. It just gets reinvested in slightly other places.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't argue for an automatic bailing out in cases of irresponsible clubs or serially irresponsible clubs, but if there was that pot of money there, that when circumstances have conspired to make things very difficult, and if the FA had that, or whoever it was had that pot of money there, it would be nice for clubs to know about it. But it's I'm just too much of a romantic, Kieran. That's all. I'm not a hard-headed.
I think we did actually. Remember, I had that sort of brainwave when I was out walking the dog one day, and I wrote down 10 things. I think this was actually one of the items for all transfers above £10 million.
Yeah,
it goes into some form of either grassroots fund or emergency fund, similar to what we see in the travel industry with the likes of ABTA and Atoll.
Yeah, well, let's make it happen. I'm not sure how, but let's. That's how it happens on telly, isn't it? Somebody says, "Let's make it happen," and then there's a montage, cut to guy rolling in money. Dave Parker. This is arguably one of my favourite questions of the entire year, Kieran. Not this year, because that wouldn't be much of praise, would it? But of the last year just gone. Dave Parker has a very simple question. Can I ask, says Dave, how the financial structure of a football club works? That's what we're here for, Dave. In particular, Dave uses the example of Arsenal and says they can somehow have a net spend of £60 million in the summer transfer window, yet still make 55 staff redundant. Now, I'm aware, Kieran, this could be a very long answer, though. So perhaps if you could sort of truncate it.
Right. Yeah, sounds like the Baroness at night, that.
Yeah, can we truncate that as well, Kieran, if that's okay? Have we Manscaped this week? Because truncating sounds like something Manscaped would do, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, using the Lawnmower 3.0. And remember, you get 20% off if you use the code name Price of Football and free shipping. In terms of David's points that he's raised, and they do have some validity, football clubs have a variety of budgets. One budget will be a playing budget, and that will be ring-fenced, and that will say to the manager, this is the minimum amount of money that you've got to play with this year. Yeah. We might be able to give you some more money if we are successful with regards to the other budgets of the club. Let's call those the operational budgets, and those are the day-to-day overheads which the clubs incur. Now, if the club can minimise or reduce its operational budget, then that's potentially more money to go into the pot for the manager. So that's the position we see ourselves in. I can understand David's feeling of unease, because it does seem inappropriate that clubs are spending huge sums of money whilst making staff redundant. But again, linking into Arsenal TV, fans don't actually care. Or let's be brutally honest. What matters is 90 minutes during the match and getting a result. And if making 50 people redundant frees up some extra cash, which gets invested in the squad, which allows them to get a transfer over the line or to renegotiate a contract, and that player delivers, then fans don't explicitly think this, that it's therefore okay to make the people redundant. But if it gets our results, then who cares?
Yeah, they cared about the mascot, and I think Arsenal fans, to be fair to there probably would have been many who had a sense of unease about the whole thing. But as you say, if that then leads to the club surviving and thriving, and that money gets spent on players, you're probably absolutely right. And also, let's be fair, Kieran, you and I are as subjective as any fan. We tend to any negative things we hear about the club, which is more of a problem for you, of course, than it is for a Palace fan. But we tend to brush them under the carpet, don't we, and have a go at other clubs. But there are very few clubs that don't have fans, things that could make their fans uneasy about something during the course of a working week. Yeah. Liam Day. Now this is sorry, mate.
Is this another relative of yours?
It could well be, Kieran. Quite possibly. All I know is that somewhere along the line, Liam has got a dairy worker in his family background. So that's the only thing we share. It's a nice name, but it's pretty much it's short for dairy worker. There's more days in the Cambridgeshire phone book than there are in the London one, apparently. So my Uncle Reg used to tell me. Mad Uncle Reg. I never checked it because most of his facts weren't true. But Liam Day, what I think you'll find an interesting question anyway, in particular, is there a case to make football clubs unlimited companies? As I understand it, says Liam, this would ensure that all liabilities and debts would then belong to the owner rather than the club. Will this ensure better running of clubs and prevent a Bury Macclesfield situation, or have I misunderstood the principle, says Liam?
Well, this is the principle of limited versus unlimited liability. So if you are an owner of a limited company, then your losses are limited to the amount of money that you initially invested. Oh, okay. If you are effectively a freelancer or a sole trader or an unlimited partner, then if the business has financial challenges, then you become personally responsible should the business be unable to pay for them. Now, the reason why limited companies were set up initially was to try to attract a variety of people to invest in companies. There were lots of financial scandals in the 19th century, which led to the initial Companies Act being created, which I think was 1901. And on the back of that, it allows people like you or I to invest. So you could buy 100 shares in Crystal Palace should you show desire. I actually own some shares in some football clubs, but I'm not at liberty to say which ones. But I wouldn't be prepared to put that money into those clubs if I knew that if the club went under, I then become personally responsible for the outstanding debts and paying off the unsecured creditors. So the logic behind this is to say to somebody, even to Roman Abramovich, you can put in £1 billion, but that's your limit. And if Chelsea go under, they're not going to be coming after you for any more. So my gut reaction, I fully understand where Liam's coming from. I think identifying the rogue owners or having some control over rogue owners, such as if you do buy a football club, you have to put a deposit down into an escrow account, which you only get back, say, 3 years after selling the club, is more of a way of attracting people with wealth into the game and ensuring that they don't misuse the love and the affection and the position of that football club in the individual town or city which it represents.
Every single broadcasting bone in my body is aching to find out which clubs you're talking about, but I'm just worried that Guy would tell me off and say, we had a 4.5 hour pod because you just kept chucking football club names at Kieran, and he just went, no. So we will move on instead to a question from Simon Robson. Simon has a proper accounting question, Kieran, which of course you love. And it's a question about 2-year loan deals and how they are accounted. To my understanding, says Simon, when a club buys a player, the fee is effectively capitalised as an intangible asset and then amortised over the contract's length. Correct, thank you. I was about to say correct. I thought it'd be better coming from you. But, says someone, would this be the case in a 2-year loan deal based on the loan fee, as when James Rodriguez went to Bayern from Real Madrid?
This is an intriguing one because the rules have been changed recently as far as the accounting of this, and also depending upon whether you are preparing your accounts using UK rules or international rules. There's a case for saying that a 2-year loan deal should be treated as simply a 2-year rental agreement, so therefore you don't show a transfer fee as such. One of the reasons why we do show a transfer fee is effectively saying that the player can then be sold by the club, and clearly you can't do that with a loan deal. Under some recent rules governing the leasing of other assets, even short-term assets, even short-term leases, which this is, for 2 years, there is a case for capitalising it. The downside of that, you'd also have to go and show the total amount owed to the other party at the date that you sign the 2-year loan deal, which clubs don't want to do because it increases the amount of debts in their accounts.
Well, just as again, I said Guys on Fire this week, and Mark Coles, who is a friend of the show, has a similar question, but Mark wants to know about academy players and the amortisation of their value. If he or she comes through an academy, says Mark, the current contract value will be amortised down, or would you use what the transfer fee would be as a revaluation reserve type account, or different?
No, if you're an academy player, you will be in the accounts at a zero value. So if you think about it from Palace's point of view, when Wilf came through the academy, as far as the balance sheet was concerned, he went in as a zero fee, and then when Palace signed him again, he would have gone in because what you actually capitalise in the accounts is the compensation that you give to the previous employer. So, because you are transferring is registration, and a transfer fee is in fact a compensation fee to another employer of the individual.
Okay. Firstly, that's Mr. Zahar to you, if you don't mind. We get to call him Wilf. Secondly, now you have answered this question for me before, but remind me. So Marcus Rashford, then technically, does that mean he has no value on Man United's books because he came through their academy?
Right. There's a difference between cost and value. He has no cost.
Right. Okay.
Does he have value? Yeah.
Yes.
The trouble with accountants is that they've got no concept of value. They just look at the cost of things. If they can find a piece of paper which says we've paid 30 quid for this, they're happy. So when you take a look at a football club balance sheet, it bears no resemblance to the value of the club, because you will have players coming through the youth ranks, and clearly, Manchester United have got Marcus Rashford, they've got Greenwood, they've got McTominay, and many others. Therefore, the balance sheet vastly undervalues the players, and also it ignores what I think is the biggest asset of all football clubs, which is the devotion of the fan base. We will be there next year. You will be there. You'll be going to Crystal Palace until you're in a box. And, it's the same for any dedicated fan. That is worth an absolute fortune to clubs, but they don't know how to work out its value.
My accountant, Bobby Numbers, has spent a lot of time this week phoning up to say, have you got a piece of paper saying this is worth £30? It's
tax return week, isn't it?
Tax return week. Any piece of paper will do. We've already decided that I should be paying my tax bill in instalments this year and next, and the year after that possibly. Ronif Naya, I apologise if I've pronounced that wrong, but Ronif is in India and says that in India we have a streaming service linked to the main sports broadcaster, and recently they've started streaming Scottish Premiership games. How much would such an arrangement earn the Scottish Premiership? And in brackets he says the same streaming service offers access to English Premier League games for around £4 a year. Well, Ronif, we've actually been covering this, Kieran, haven't we? But from the Scottish end, so to speak. So I'm willing to say with Glasgow Rangers, I believe, brokering this deal or owning this deal, it's probably not very much money going to the Scottish Premier League.
That's right. So Rangers decided to negotiate with Indian broadcasters, and therefore they will be taking a commission, and deservedly so. They've taken on the risk. I think it's interesting also that Rangers have recruited an Indian female player for their women's team,
Right.
and I think this will help to drive interest and traffic, in terms of the broadcasts. But in terms of the rest of the money for the SPFL, with due respect to Scottish football, I don't think it's going to be moving the dial very much, because I was teaching Phil Brown 10 days ago. Yeah, you remember Phil Brown, ex manager of Hull, and he's currently managing a team in India.
Yeah, is he? Okay.
And he says, there's a lot of interest in the Premier League,
Right.
but I don't think it extends beyond that.
Well, that's interesting, because that £4 a year then, if there is a lot of interest in the Premier League, £4 a year doesn't seem a lot of money, because normally when I ask you about that, you'll say that's because it's in a country where there's no real demand for Premier League football, but clearly there is.
Well, yeah, £4 a year, to me, that sounds ridiculous. Is that £4 a month? I could understand it, but
Kieran, I'm merely a cipher. I read out what Guy tells.
Oh yeah, same here.
Exactly. Let's not start picking at that here. I think Ronif would be interested in this as well. The Rangers, I still haven't quite got to the bottom of the Rangers Scottish Premiership deal. Were the rest of the Scottish Premiership aware that Rangers were doing this on their behalf, or was this just a piece of really clever initiative from Rangers that has paid off?
Well, my understanding is that Rangers were looking at the markets in which Scottish football was presently being distributed. India, huge country, an awful lot of very, very passionate sports fans, and said, we're willing to take a punt on it. And I say to them, good luck and hope it comes off. We're hoping to get Neil Doncaster back to come on the show. So, perhaps this is one of the things we can have a chat with him about.
Oh, Neil was very good when he was on the show before. My God, we've got a lot more questions to ask him now than we had then, haven't we? Wow, that will have to be, I think that might have to be a special. Our penultimate question comes from Nathan Edge. Hello, Nathan. And again, he's been linking questions because it's about streaming. Nathan says, and again, this is, I think, a really interesting thought. Nathan says, do you think clubs might want to continue a streaming service even after fans come back, especially in League 1, League 2 level? I'd rather see full stadia, says Nathan, wouldn't we all? But could there be a financial benefit to scrapping the Saturday 3 p.m. blackout rule and continuing to receive income through streaming and pay-per-game?
It's an intriguing one, this. I mean, we do have the iFollow service operating in the EFL where you pay £10 a match, but if I understand this correctly, that doesn't cover as Nathan, which is Nathan Edge. That's the name of a spy, surely.
It's a great name, yeah.
It is.
I always go straight to Nathan Detroit, but I'm from a musical background, darling. Yeah, it's a great name. Nathan's always There's a wealth of possibilities in that name. Yes.
But as Nathan said, the 3 p.m. Saturday rule is that you cannot broadcast football matches. Now, if the government decides in a post-COVID environment that they're going to scrap that particular law, and there will be pressure on them to do so, then you could see an interest in this. Whether it could be done in such a way that it's only for away fans, because if you are Exeter and you're playing Cambridge, realistically, how many fans are you going to take one way or the other? Would it actually be more lucrative to charge the fans £10 a match instead of going to watch the match and splitting them up? What I suspect the EFL will do is that they will be getting out their spreadsheets, they'll be crunching their numbers to work out whether overall it will be worth it, because away fans tend to be quite hardcore, and my view is that I don't go to Barnsley or to Carlisle or wherever it's going to be for an away fixture. I don't go there for the football. I go there for it's your mates, it's the giggles, it's the lunatic memories.
Of course.
I remember going to Plymouth for it was an end of season game with nothing in it for either team, and one of our lads got absolutely bladdered in the pub, before the match. He fell asleep on the terraces because it was quite hot. It was April, May game. The police kicked him out. He staggered back to Plymouth Station and got on the train, not realising he was going in the wrong direction and ended up at the arse end of Cornwall at about 10 o'clock at night. And that's what away trips are about. It's not about the football, because watching Brighton play away for 40 years, 8 times out of 10 we're not going to win. More than 8 times out of 10 we're not.
Yeah, well, you know what those Brighton fans are like. They get that third glass of Chardonnay inside them and a crusty cucumber sandwich, and there's no stopping them. In terms of streaming, it often occurs to me, Kieran, because there are, joking aside, there are, as you say, there are hardcore of away fans, but there are a lot of people through work commitments or family commitments or just getting older commitments who don't fancy the schlep every week, that perhaps Palace fans that may go to see games in Watford or Tottenham or whatever, but don't really fancy the midweek trips. I always thought, rather than individual streaming, being back is where the money is. Because I think most fans would say, right, I can't afford this trip to Plymouth from Carlisle. I don't really want to watch it on my own, but if Carlisle are showing it to 300 Carlisle fans on a big screen in one of the lounges there, I think that's where people would turn up and watch it, I would say.
Yep, I think that's a perfect idea. It's just a case of getting enough clubs to buy into that to allow the EFL to change their rules. So remember, you've got to get this 2/3 majority, and some owners will be reluctant. But if the home team could be compensated for the being back, everybody could end up winning, because you could charge. You could charge 25 or 30 quid. You get to see the match. You get a free drink. You get a pie thrown in and so on. And you think, well, actually, the amount it saved me on petrol and the amount of earache it's also saved me, because I'm now going to be home at 6 o'clock as opposed to 10. It could be worthwhile, and everybody wins.
I've had 2 good ideas on the same pod. I'll be hosting this thing in a month or 2. Now, Kieran, our final question is from Tim Evely. You may think this is a frivolous question, but Tim's a Palace fan and he's a big unit, so I'm allowing it, basically. And he's got my... he knows where I live, basically. Hello, Tim. Following on from the news that Sheffield Wednesday are owned by someone who made their money in tuna fish, should club nicknames and badges be altered to reflect how owners made their money? So Wednesday become the tuna, Brighton become the gamblers, and Palace become the advertisers. And Tim spells Brighton with 4 asterisks. Good lad. Well done. But I quite like that idea, frivolous or not. I quite like that.
I initially said, yes, this would be good, but, and I don't like taking advantage of this because it's a club with whom I've got huge affection, do Bury become the asset strippers? And then, of course, we get the thorny issue of, West Ham, the fans singing "Come on, you dildos," and "Up the butt plugs" really isn't going to work, is it? Or perhaps it will.
That's the reason I left this question in. I knew this would get your juices flowing. Well, Kieran, thank you. It's been another pod. I've got to. As you know, I sit here and record in what used to be our garage, but isn't anymore. But I've got a terrible 3-yard walk. How am I going to get from the garage to the back of the house? I simply don't know in this flurry, because it's flurrying down. It's flurrying down. Organised for your neck of the woods. I might need a St Bernard. I might get Ali to send me out some tennis rackets, and I'll walk out. I used to be. Here's another fact for you, everybody. In case this comes up I used to be secretary of the British Olympic Snowshoe Association.
Jesus Christ!
No, your facts are more racy than mine, but it's true. I'll explain in further detail on a different pod. I'd rather have been in Moscow with the girlfriend of a mafia chief, but there you go. Questions at priceoffootball.com if you have any questions for us on any aspect of football finance, or indeed, we can open it up. We'll take questions about relationships, I think, Kieran, from now on. Just that's what you want, questions at priceoffootball.com. We will see you on Thursday for a news pod. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire to say goodbye.
Bye.
The price of football. the price of football.